So welcome back to another episode, and I cannot believe what the day is today. Unbelievable. February 14th, Valentine's Day, not because of that crap, but because it is Street Fighter's 25th anniversary. Street Fighter 2 was released worldwide today, 25 years ago. And for the rest of the world, it was Thursday. So what I thought I'd do today is go through all of the years of my memories playing Street Fighter and what led me to each game and the overall passion for Street Fighter and how much of a mark it has made on my life personally and on the world. Now, the closest thing I got in the 80s was Karate Champ. That was the closest thing to a one-on-one fighting game. It was a novelty, it wasn't very deep, and it wasn't that interesting, but it's all we really had. Until one day I went to an arcade and I saw a game called Street Fighter, and this is the first game. And I walk into the arcade, and back then there were some versions of it with buttons, but there was other versions with big pads. So you would have to punch these pads down to activate, punches or, kicks on the screen and stuff like that. And most of the arcades I went to, these pads have been ripped out by hoodlums and bastards and all that. So you were punching plastic and hurting your hand, but you were doing it anyways. But the one thing that got me about Street Fighter 1, the very first game, was the size of the characters on screen. And it really, to me at the time, was like an anime in a fighting game. I was like, oh wow, look at this. I can't believe the size of the characters and all that, but it was very rudimentary. The controls were not, to me, that great. And years later, I ended up getting Fighting Street, was the TurboGrafx version, and it still wasn't great. But, I was interested though in Street Fighter when I saw this game. I was like, this is cool. But it wasn't until I went to an arcade in Vancouver here in Metrotown Mall, and I was walking along, and the outside of the arcade was all in glass, and I'll never forget it. I'm walking past the glass, and there's a huge crowd of people around one game, and I was going to go in the arcade anyways. That would have happened. But I see everybody crash around this arcade game, and I'm like, I got to see what the fuck they're playing. So I go in, and I have to stand on my tippy toes to see the screen. There was probably, I'm not joking, 15 to 20 people just surrounding it. And at the time, I was a younger guy, so I wasn't that tall. So I'm like, oh, what the fuck is this? And I just saw characters doing, fireballs against each other. And I was like, whoa, this is like Dragon Ball Z. That's what I thought at the time. And I was like, oh, wait, is that Street Fighter 2? I remember seeing the 2. And that was like a big moment. I was like, whoa. And I just could see the way the game was playing. It looked a lot more complicated, a lot more, there's a lot more that you could do within the game, more punches and things like that. I was like, whoa, this is like Street Fighter 1, but wait, this is way better. This is like something, it was just something else. And it had a huge impact on me, and I was like, wow, totally taken back by it. The crowd was taken back. The world wasn't really ready for Street Fighter. It really wasn't. Arcade games were a lot of fun. Don't get me wrong, I loved arcade games more than anything. But nothing had brought people into an arcade like this game. Nothing like it. So, that was that. I saw it. I think I played it once or twice. I sucked at the game. I didn't know what was going on. Because there was a lot of people with better skills. So, that was it. Until I had an arcade up the road from me at this place called Strawberry Hills. And this arcade moved in, and what's great is all the young hoodlums like myself went up there every single day. It started off as a really nice place, and then it just became the biggest punk, druggy hangout known to mankind. But on the very early days when it just opened, I drove up there with some friends of mine, and I was like, oh wow, there's an arcade, I'll just go see what games they have. And I'm looking in, I'm like, oh, they got Combat Tribes, cool, they got this game, cool, some pinball games. And then I went around the corner, and I just turned around, and I'm like, oh my god, it's Street Fighter 2. There's a Street Fighter 2 arcade machine here. This was a huge deal. I know, I'll keep saying that, but now we take these things for granted. Now you can just download a game, it's no problem, anything like that. But back then, arcade games were light years ahead of what you were getting at home. And you were getting, you had to go to an arcade to see these. You had to leave the home to see this stuff. You had to venture into these drug-induced places to, be offered so many drugs before you walk in the door. Before as you left, you're like a smoker or drinker, whatever. But I got in there and I was like, this is my machine. And that became my machine. And every single day, I would train on Street Fighter 2. My early days were rough. They really were, because we have a huge Asian population in Vancouver, and I'm not being stereotypical, but all the Asian guys absolutely ruled at the game, and people like myself absolutely sucked. And then, I don't know how, everybody knew the techniques. They knew all the, I know since, the uppercuts and a lot of the techniques. I didn't know that. There was one guy who'd always walk into the arcade, and he'd always put bicycle gloves on. And he had this big fat little kid behind him that'd always wear a jacket, and it said Sweat Secret on the back. Really bad English, like Sweat Secret. And we always used to call him Sweet Secret. And he'd walk in. It was like a wrestling match. He's like, yeah, my friend's gonna kick your motherfucking ass. You fucking white people suck. You're all gonna die. And we did. It was funny. But this kid was such a racist bastard. We're like, what the fuck is going on here? But the guy who was the good player put on the bicycle gloves, wouldn't say a goddamn thing, was nice enough, kind of. He didn't speak. He just put his quarter in and kicked your ass. And he just knew the timing, he knew the moves, and this is very early in the game's history. We're talking 1991, as they say. Very early on. And it sounds funny, but everybody in the arcade aspired to beat this guy. If you could beat this guy, you were the Street Fighter. I know it sounds absolutely stupid, but you would be elevated in the arcade status. So, I mean, I'm not kidding you. It was like a Rocky thing to me when I look back on it. It really is. I remember being at that arcade at 11 at night, nobody else being around on a Friday night. Everybody's off, having some good times. I was there practicing my uppercuts over and over, backwards and forwards, left to right, because that was the trick. You could usually play good on one side, but you couldn't play good on another. So I was really good in playing on the left side, so I was trying to make myself really good on the right side. So I was just doing that. I was just playing on the right side continuously to get good at it. If I was on the left side, I would just jump onto the right side and just do all my moves that way and continue on the game that way. And I did this for a long time. And I started playing more and more people. And back then, if you're playing a game and you're playing against somebody else, so obviously it was a two-player fighting game. If you're playing against somebody else who wants to play will come up and they put their quarter on the screen. And that means they get to play next. Whoever lost, that person would grab their quarter, kick the other fucker off, and put it in and play. And that's how you continue on. These are some of the things that you'll never see again in arcades. Not the same way. We have arcades still in Vancouver, but the entire community aspect is gone. Like, now we have online matches. Like, everybody plays Street Fighter online now, where you would be in a lineup waiting to fight the next guy. But there was a huge community based upon that, and where people were face-to-face talking and sharing moves and all the rumors and all the bullshit about this game. It's extraordinary when you think back. And so I was practicing, and I was getting better. Slowly but surely. I got better and better and better. Until this one fateful day, I was on the machine, and I'm just playing, and the bicycle guy comes up with the gloves, and he puts them on, and we start playing. And it was something like out of the Matrix. I felt like Neo. I just could counter all of his moves. I knew everything he was going to do because I was doing them all the time. I'd become him, his skill level. And he was like, I could see he was like, what the? But the funny thing about it is, I beat him. And I beat him really, really well. And he put up a good match, don't get me wrong. But it was the end of a certain era. I was no longer the underdog. I was now one of the best in the arcade. I really was. This game was my life. My mom would give me like $3 lunch money. I would go to school and I'd steal like Mexi fries of friends of mine and whatever I could get. And then I'd go to the arcade and I'd spend my $3 on training on Street Fighter every day for like a year. It was crazy. And And I beat this guy, and it was so weird. It's a moment I'll never forget, where I did my final move, I win, it kind of hits me, but it's so subtle, and I didn't look over, and he just kind of, grabs his backpack, and he was gone. And that was an end of a moment. It was the end of a journey for me, and I really enjoyed that moment. I'll never have a moment like that again in my life. Like, that was a really cool video game moment for a younger guy. As I say, I was 16 years old at that time. And, well, I'll quickly kind of go through all of the rest of the games. Champion Edition came out and Turbo came out, and I embraced those games, and I really enjoyed them. And it was funny. I was the guy smoking on the bench outside, and somebody would come out and say, "Hey, there's some other guys in the arcade. He's really, really good." And I'd go in there and beat him, and it was not really a bit of a problem. And then we got Super Street Fighter, and the funny thing, then we started getting Street Fighter after Street Fighter over the years. And so Street Fighter 2 is a memorable game, and I went to Las Vegas. I nearly got stabbed playing Street Fighter. I mentioned this a long time ago. I'll just briefly mention this before I move on to all the other Street Fighters. My parents were staying not in Vegas. It was Reno. It was Reno. I remember now. This is a long time ago, where my parents went off to gamble, and I was a young guy. I didn't gamble, so I was like, "What am I going to do?" In the hotel that we were at, there was a little arcade room. You know how they had those arcade rooms that had like 4 machines in there, and you go and just play in there. So I went in there, and there's this like gangster guy in there, and he's playing Street Fighter, and I didn't give a fuck. So I go put my quarter in to fight against him. And he says to me, it was so weird, dude. I'm not kidding. This is serious shit. He pulls out a knife on me. And he goes, "Yeah, if you fucking beat me, I'm going to stab you." And it happened so fast. So I go up, I put my quarter in, and he says that to me. And then just like this, and I cannot believe I said this. I said, "Yeah, you'll only get one chance before I knock you to the ground." And I just started playing. I didn't give a fuck. I was like, "Oh, whatever, you fucking loser." But what a moment. It was only afterwards that I think, holy, that was kind of like a bit of a serious moment. I put my quarter in and I kicked his fucking ass. And obviously that knife was put away as soon as I said my one-liner to him. He put it in. I bluffed him. I really bluffed him. And then afterwards he's like, "Hey man," he's like, you like women, right? You like women? I'm like, yeah. He's like, "Well, come down to the Reno Strip tonight and hang out with me and all my homies. We're going to have a really good time out there." I'm like, yeah, I'll see you there. I'll be there, all right. Shit. So, it's funny kind of some of the Street Fighter matches I had in those early days. And then, the match that I had in Las Vegas where there was 2 Street Fighter machines. I'm in a Street Fighter mood here. I'll just keep on going. There was 2 Street Fighter machines. One with one set of controls on it and another with another set of controls on it. But they were linked. And I've never seen it before or since. It was only in Las Vegas. And so I'm just playing on this one cabinet onto myself, and there's the other cabinet there where a second player can join in. So I'm playing, and all of a sudden, and I'm playing this guy, and I'm kicking his ass. And man, what was with the Asian racists back then? Because I'm playing against some Asian guy who gives a fuck, and this Asian guy walks up with a suitcase and a suit on, and really top-looking type of guy. A really businessman type of guy. And he walks up and I'm kicking this guy's ass. And this guy turns to me, he's like, "What the fuck?" He's like, "You're Asian." He goes, "We're Asian." He goes, "We shouldn't be losing this white guy over here. Come on. And he's like, "Fuck." And so I beat the guy, and so he leaves. So the guy with the suitcase puts it down, and he puts in his money. And I'm telling you, I've mentioned this before. It was one of the hardest, most challenging matches of my life. Because I felt like I'd met myself in Street Fighter 2. I met myself. This guy was so good, I couldn't believe it. And I was sweating. And my hands were like the adrenaline was kicking in. I was like, I can't lose to this asshole. And he kept on, we kept on at each other. And I won the first round. And I was like, holy shit. He's like, "Oh, yeah, you got that one. I got this next one." And I'm like, fuck, these matches are hard. Neither of us are jumping. We know the game. Street Fighter 2, once you know the game, it's a very simplistic game. And I'm using Ken, he's using Ryu. It's a match, we're stalemating each other completely. He beats me the second round, and I'm like, oh my god, we're going into the third round of this? This is a level of competition. Even the guy with the gloves wasn't this guy's level. And this is me at my peak with Street Fighter 2. We go into the third round, and sweating, and I know he was too. And I beat him. I was so overjoyed that, you know, there was a couple of matches. There was the one at the arcade when I beat the guy with the gloves, and I beat this guy with the suit and all that in the suitcase. The briefcase. I beat him. I finally beat him. I was like, that fucking yes. And those are the two matches I remember the most in life. That was an incredible moment. And I beat the guy with the briefcase. His time was done in life. He was over. And he put another quarter in. My confidence after that, you know how it is. It was like, we were like this, but then all of a sudden I beat him. His confidence went down, mine went up. I beat him, no problem, and it was the end of him. And that, to me, was the end of Street Fighter 2. That was the end of that era, and we got all the other Street Fighters, and I enjoyed them all. But it wasn't until Alpha 2 and Alpha 3 at home did I really reawaken into Street Fighter again. There was a time when I saw games like Killer Instinct, which I like, and Street Fighter the movie, the game, the digitized movie, the game, which I didn't like. And I thought, and everybody was surrounding that game. I was like, oh my god, why is everybody surrounding this game? This is terrible. This isn't Street Fighter. And it wasn't until the Alpha series I was like, oh, thank God they're going back to the cartoony look and all that. And the gameplay for Alpha had gotten deeper. And now I was sitting at home on my PlayStation 1. I could play Alpha, the arcade-looking version, at home. It was nice. The Saturn version, I know, has more frames, but I had the PlayStation 1 version. And I played with Rob every day for years. And that was our game. And every day we'd be drinking tea, smoking cigarettes, playing Street Fighter. Alpha 2 and into Alpha 3. And what a great freaking time to play video games. And, obviously, back in the day, I just want to cut back for a second because I'm talking so much here, all in one take. Street Fighter Third Strike. Street Fighter 3. I played Street Fighter 2, but it's like, oh my god, Street Fighter 3's coming out. And I played Street Fighter 3. It was so unique and so different. And it took me to the Dreamcast to really appreciate it. At first, I was like, this is Street Fighter 3? It was so weird. The characters were so strange. I didn't quite embrace it at first. I didn't hate it, but I didn't know what to make of it. And it wasn't until I got it at home in the Dreamcast and I was playing it, I was like, this is fucking excellent. So that was my initial reaction to Street Fighter, 3. So I did all the Alpha series and I loved it. And then obviously the fourth game came out, Street Fighter 4, and that just opened up a brand new level of Street Fighter. And as I say, I think with myself, I'm a Street Fighter 2 guy at heart. I always will. That was my peak. And Street Fighter Alpha was also my second final peak. Street Fighter 4 I got into and I played for years and I got pretty good at it. But I was never where I was at with Street Fighter 2. Obviously, the gameplay mechanics had gone a lot deeper over time. Now you could play some of the best players in the entire world. And yeah, the game got so complicated in 4. It was really cool. I loved it. But it was honestly kind of one of those moments where I was like, I'm not retired because I'm an active Street Fighter player, but I've had my day and I play Street Fighter now for fun, not for competition. Back in the day, I was very competitive. Now, I obviously still want to win at Street Fighter, but I lack the skills of some of the high-level players out there. And hey, so great way to sound it off is that Street Fighter 5 is coming out in another week or so. Actually, no, as I do this video, a couple of days away. That's awesome. So I'm going to embrace my favorite character of all time, Ken. And I'm going to get online. I'm going to play. I'm going to have a good time. And will I ever be able to recapture my youth of Street Fighter 2? Probably not, but I'm going to have a really good time doing it. And look at that, eh? Look at when you think about all what I was just talking about. Look at what Street Fighter has done for the world. I mean, competitive fighting in a way that rivals sports, if not exceeds sports. I think, and I'm so happy where Evo is. I'm so happy to see that Evo exists and it's as big as it's become. And look at the fighting game community now. It's it's incredible to look at, and it feels wonderful to be a part of. I love where Street Fighter has gone. I love that it's flourished and not died off. You know, like a lot of other genres and a lot of other games over time, it's still, in the year 2016 right now, still flourishing. And man, it's been 25 years of playing Street Fighter and loving every minute of it. You know, the good, the bad, the defeats, you know how it is. It's a wonderful game, so wonderfully crafted. There's been so many different, I won't say clones, but different fighting games that I think were inspired by Street Fighter that we have all come to love as well. And we owe so much to Street Fighter and to Capcom for creating this game and creating so many iconic characters. Could you believe that, you know, Ken and Guile and Chun-Li, when you first saw them, that they would be iconic characters 25 years later? I never saw that coming. I knew I loved the characters, but I never knew 25 years later we'd call them iconic and we'd still be playing them in Street Fighter like 5. Like, who would have thought that would have fucking happened? I thought Street Fighter was nearly done just before the Alpha series. I thought, oh, I think that's about it for Street Fighter, but it's cool that it's continued on over the years. And guys, I just wanted to share that was my one rant on Street Fighter. I really had a lot to say about it. I love the series. I have the arcade game here right next to me. I've always loved playing it. I've always adored the series. So anyways, guys, until next time.